for letting me be part of this celebration. It's very exciting to me. It's exciting for a number of reasons, but one of them that I witnessed here is the family that you are. And that is precisely and exactly what we considered 45 years ago to be the trajectory of the Minority Fellowship Program. So I'm delighted to see that you are the embodiment of our early dreams and ideas, and that you have taken it on to new levels and new heights, and fleshed out things that we only sort of imagined but wanted to see. So you're doing it, and I'm very excited by that. I want to thank Janet. She's running around all the time. I don't know where she is. Oh, there she is. Janet for inviting me, and I think Frida may have been involved as well, so thank you, Frida. I want to thank John Lowe. John still there? That's good, because John, this is a long-going story, but I had surgery in February, stomach surgery, and I was on a wound vac for a period of time, and I'm still getting home nurse care 3 days a week. But I had committed to this before the surgery, and I really wanted to come. So I was afraid about how I was going to do it, and then one night I woke up and thought, hey, I'm talking to nurses. There should be no reason why I couldn't get some help here. so Janet first talked to Frida, but she had an unfortunate circumstance that prevented her from talking out. But John Lowe stepped in, and he came by this afternoon and changed my dressing. And we chatted about the indigenous nurses, and it was a wonderful experience. And so I'm very thankful for that. I want to congratulate Dr. Grant for being president of the ANA. I think that's extremely important that people of color are leading these national organizations. I think increasingly they mean well, but they are not necessarily educated about what that means to mean well and to do well. So it's good to have someone in a position to guide the organizations in meaningful and proper ways. I'm kind of an academic by nature, in my soul, in my DNA, and when Janet says you're going to do a keynote address, I go to a 15-page piece, and she kept saying, oh, no, I want you to tell stories. And I said, oh, okay, I can tell some stories, but so I'm going to tell some stories, mostly about Hattie, because she is the story. I mean, we did stuff, but Hattie is really one whose stories are interesting. I want to begin by quoting, see, this is my geeky academic side, Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher, who observed that we must live life forward, but we can only understand it backward. And I've been thinking about this for a while, and I really see this exercise of trying to talk about the history of MFP as understanding what we had done backwards, although at the time we were doing it, we were living it forward. We didn't know what we were doing. We just knew that it was important. We knew that we were committed to it. We had faith, we had belief, we had energy, and we worked and worked and worked. And I'm going to talk about some of the things that happened and how they occurred and what some of the context was for them. And I hope that in the end you'll understand what you have inherited by being members of the MFP family. And you've taken it to new heights, but there was a beginning. And so I want to sort of share that. The MFP, for me, is not just a program, it's a project. A project is a collaborative enterprise that is carefully planned and designed to achieve a particular aim. Now this is going backwards. That is not how we thought about it. But that's why I look back on it and say, yeah, look what happened over time. That's what it has become. It's always been collaborative, has been carefully planned and designed, but has evolved over time and always had as the aim growing a healthcare workforce that is diverse, culturally competent, and committed, which is important, to serve the unmet mental and behavioral health needs of underrepresented communities of color. 45 years is a long time by almost any standard. How many of you are 45 years old or younger? Raise your hands. Wow, look at that. So here's a thought. You have never lived in a world that did not include the Minority Fellowship Program. We are like people born after 1941 and the atomic bomb. We've always lived in the nuclear age. We've always lived in the MFP age. And I think that's significant because you're part of that. You're part of that story. So I want to share how we evolved, some of the context and so on. But I was really trying to think about what is 45 years? What is 1974? What is that like mentally, psychologically, emotionally? So I went back to what was going on in 1974. MFP started September 1974. Richard Nixon resigned August 1974. So we were born on the demise of Richard Nixon. If you think about Watergate as history, Watergate is our beginning. That's significant to me. Since MFP started, there have been 8 different U.S. presidents. And of those 8, most were elected. So I was thinking about, what was the #1 song in 1974? The Way We Were, Barbra Streisand. This year, I don't know what that means, but I thought it was cool. All in the Family is the #1 TV show. So I tried to look for the #1 TV show this year, but there's so many categories, so many different ones, I couldn't really come up with a single one. So I didn't put one in.
You're right.
Oprah Winfrey had had just won the Miss Tennessee Black Tennessee Beauty pageant in 1971. And that catapulted her into a news anchor job in Nashville in 1974. The first black woman who was a news anchor at that TV station, Oprah Winfrey. In 2019, she's Oprah. And you don't need to say anything more. That's pretty remarkable and extraordinary. That's the span of time we're talking about. I'm a big sports guy too, so I got to do it there. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was MVP of the NBA in 1974, and I didn't know this before, but I found out that Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's home run record in 1974. So far back. And just to bring things up to date, the Greek Freak and the Beard are one of them is going to win the MVP of the NBA this year. So there you go. So in 1971, the Congressional Black Caucus was founded by 12 black congressmen and Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm is significant. She's probably someone who does not get the recognition that she should get, but she was a powerful and important mover of black political life. And when we talk about the Black Caucus, we often don't realize that she was an important part of that. And in 1974, Louis Stokes was its chair. I remember going to Black Caucus legislative weekends in the 70s. I was living in Boston at the time. That was such a big deal. People held decked out. We sort of forgot about the legislative agenda. They later actually put in some substantive stuff, but it was a serious part of it. Ed Brooke was senator from Massachusetts, the first elected black senator in the United States. I'm not sure, I think he was, but I'm not sure if he was part of the Black Caucus because he was a Republican. And in 1974, the National Conference of Black Mayors was founded by 13 black mayors, and Mayor Jackson was elected mayor, first black mayor of Atlanta. Jackson, Hartsfield Jackson Airport. We just fly through there all the time, but Mayor Jackson is the person who's acknowledged with that. But let me then, they said these people and these efforts were part of the political and social landscape in 1974. For many today, 1974 is truly relegated to history, the past. But what is remarkable to me is that the past is also the present. MFP is still here. And I want us to give you and all of us a round of applause, please. I wrote a little piece about racism, but it's probably going to take too long, so I'm not going to. It's not long, but let me just mention one thing. I talk about institutional anti-racism. Institutional racism became, when I wrote Prejudice and Racism in 1972, institutional racism was the big thing. And it was important because what it said is that institutions can be racist if they produce disparate outcomes, whether people themselves were racist or had racist intentions. That meant that the solution had to be broader than fixing people. The system did it, and people had to figure out how to function in those systems that inherently produce racist outcomes. So I'm talking about anti-racism as an institutional practice. How do we construct institutions to function as anti-racist organizations? I think that's a big challenge for us in the future. And I wanted to make that point. Because our culture, our society, our institutions are intertwined, and what's in people's heads is also what's in the culture, and what's in the culture is also in people's heads. And I think people with a psychiatric mental health orientation can best understand that. And as this aside, some years later, Chet Pierce and a group of us were trying to get racism into the DSM as a diagnosis. It did work. And it probably will never work, but you'll see Chet. And that is a nice segue to Chet. In May 1969, a group of black psychiatrists headed by Drs. Chester Pierce of Harvard and Jim Comer of Yale met to address their view that the National Institute of Mental Health and other federal agencies had failed to work effectively to eliminate racism in their programs and within the larger society. Two proposals emerged from this meeting. One, that the NIMH develop a distinct organizational unit to promote the development of mental health programs for minority groups, that the leadership developed an NIMH affirmative action plan. That never really happened, but the first did. In response to their recommendation, NIMH established a Center for Minority Group Mental Health. We always called it the Minority Center. And hired Dr. James Ralph, a black psychiatrist, as its first director. The Minority Center's principal objectives were to, pretty lofty, identify and analyze the dynamic aspects of institutional racism within mental health and human service institutions. Pretty big charge. Second was to really understand racism in the majority population. This is after the riots and Kerr Commission report in 1968, and white racism and institutional racism were big issues then. But third, and this is the one that's really relevant, develop a pool of skilled professionals available to plan and implement programs designed to eliminate institutional racism. So skilled professionals such as yourselves and all those that preceded you are part of this cadre that's supposed to address these complex issues of racism. The Minority Center NIMH issued a call for proposals, I'll go through this quickly, to 5 disciplines: sociology, psychiatry, social work, nursing, and psychology. Sociology dropped out early, so I won't talk too much about them. The first grants were awarded in 1974 for a period of 5 years and offered training stipends of $3,900. What are your training stipends now? $2,300. How much? $2,300. $2,300 a month. 23, no, I'm sorry. 3,000. Yes. Yes. 23,000. Wow. For APA, and for APA psychology, 30 trainee stipends were budgeted for the first 5 years of the training grant. 10 trainees per year for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, the first cohort would have spent their 3 years, the second cohort got 1 more year, third cohort got 2 more years. So we had money to see them all out. And at the end of 5 years, we were to have 30 total fellows. Across all the programs, about 60 trainees were funded in that first 5-year period. So if you multiply that by 9, it should be about 560 folks who should have gotten their degrees. In reality, 5 years was not enough. It's less than about 3 years is not enough. Funding for 3 years is not enough when your degree takes 5 to 7 years. So that was bogus on its face. But we use a variety of mechanisms, cost sharing with universities, money from our associations, other monies, so that we were able to support more than that number. And in fact, now if we look back, MFPs collectively have supported doctoral training, and not to mention master's and other training, of over 1,700 persons in mental health fields. Yes. But the number's probably higher, but I erred on the conservative side because I wasn't sure. So, I became MFP Director at APA in 1977, the same year that Hattie became MFP Director of ANA. We joined Gene Spurlock, who was the Director in Psychiatry, Carl Scott, who was the Director for the Council on Social Work Education, and Paul Williams, who was the Director of Sociology. We quickly became a team, and this is the leadership team for the MFP, your historical ancestors. We each brought our own brand of expertise and skill sets to this enterprise. Jean was the moral authority. She always kept ethics, morality, and human grace of our work at the forefront and confronted anyone who disregarded this higher purpose. She was particularly keen to protect women from being discriminated against and diminished. I don't know what to call it, but I was sort of the operative and spokesperson for the group. I generally led communications, set up meetings, chaired meetings, and spearheaded special projects. And Hattie was, for those who knew her, Hattie. She was a singular and unique personality with connections that generated extraordinary access to corridors of power, and that could intimidate, befuddle, or manipulate policymakers into doing our bidding. Our major ally was Senator Daniel Inouye from Hawaii. As we called him, the senator, and Hattie at times referred to him as that one-armed man up on Capitol Hill. He would open doors that were not commonly available to directors of NIMH training programs. We were not common. as NIH directors. We were just grant recipients, but we were running around there like we were a gang of five on the hill. And it seemed natural to us, I must say. I also should mention, I don't have a picture of Pat, but Pat DeLeon was Senator Noy's legislative director, and Pat was our friend. I think, did Pat have training as a nurse?
No, psychology.
I know he was psychology.
And lawyer.
And a lawyer, that's right, he was a lawyer too. So Pat is still around, and he's still doing mischief. Good mischief, but mischief nevertheless. But Pat was sort of the operative who sort of carried out the kind of programs that Senator Shinoria was willing to endorse and we were pushing to have. So, they want to have these stories. I'm not sure where to insert them, but I'll sort of spot them. So one thing about Hattie is that she was always pushing whatever envelope was supposed to envelop her. When she started, A&A was headquartered in Kansas City. Anybody remember that?
Yes.
And she was always fighting with the executive director because the executive director somehow thought that she should manage the money that came in from the grant. As you may not know, no one ever manages Hattie. So her strategy was to get her posse to come out to Kansas City and convince them that not only were they wrong to try to influence her money, but that they were in violation of best practices for what this program was meant to be. It wasn't entirely untrue, but it was embellished in a way that was helpful to achieving our goals. So I had many trips out to Kansas City to sit there with the executive director and tell how we do things back in DC and how she should really toe the line. And moved to DC not too much long after that. And interestingly, when Hattie did move to DC, she had to get an apartment. And I'll give you one guess as to where she found an apartment. The Watergate. That's how I had to grow. She had this incredible ability to get almost anybody to do what she wanted. It was remarkable. I remember going to one of her programs, somewhere in Atlanta or someplace, and she had Freeman Grabowski, president of UMBC, a very famous, highly regarded president who's done remarkable things with that university and bringing students of color along in math and science. He's just really remarkable. He's written a book. He's really, just really a dynamic person. And here Hattie had him coming to one of her little workshops for nurses. But she could do that. She was not constrained by convention in any way. So now we go to the Carters. Jimmy Carter was president, I guess from 76 to 80. And so when Jimmy was president, we said, oh wow, this is going to be great. But in fact, his administration actually cut some of our budgets, or at least threatened to cut them. And that was a little bit of a surprise to us. However, Mrs. Carter was, her First Lady project was community mental health. She was honorary chair of the Commission on Mental Health, and she was one of the people who pushed and lobbied for the mental health, Community Mental Health Act, and she somehow and I don't know, you don't ever know exactly how things work with Hattie, but somehow she became a close friend with Rosengarten. So among the things that we did was to visit the White House, to have greetings with Rosengarten, and to help establish our significance in the Washington circles. I have a quote there from her about mental health. I'm not going to read it, but she was very committed. And years later, when she was out of office, the Carter Center, she used to have, I think, biennial meetings on mental health stigma. And people would come and talk about how can we reduce the stigma of mental health. And I was fortunate enough to go a couple of times. And she, like Jimmy, did probably more after the White House than during the White House, because the politics were in the way. Facing that cut under the Carter administration, we arranged a meeting with, this is how we roll, the new Secretary Patricia Roberts Harris, Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. This is unheard of. Grantees going to the secretary of the agency that oversees all of it. But we did that, I'm sure, with help from the Hill. And we went there hoping to get Secretary Harris to put MFP in as a line item in the budget. So then, and I know you couldn't take it away. She said, no, I can't do that. What I suggest you do is that you go back to NIMH, talk to the leadership, and get them to treat you the way they should. So I said, okay, we'll do that. At the time, Kurt Parviz was the director of NIH. So we didn't bother with our project officers and those kinds of folks. We went to the director of NIH, had meetings with him, made our case, and eventually achieved some success. But I will say that Hattie, I had mentioned that she's unconventional. One meeting, I think it was a telephone conference call, we had sort of at the end of the day, Hattie was unhappy with the kinds of decisions that the director seemed to be wanting to make. And she threatened to come out to NIMH with her switchblade, and she was going to make him understand that he needed to think differently about his matters. That was it. In meetings, she would adopt, depending on her situation or mood, she would go off into unbelievable tirades, cursing and belittling and threatening these people. I mean, so much so, I mean, we knew Hattie was, kind of that way. But I would get nervous sometimes because it just took it so far. But she had this incredible ability to destabilize almost any situation. And once it was destabilized, then we could kind of flow in and make reasonable suggestions and get reasonable kind of outcomes. So it really worked. I mean, it's sort of the extreme version of bad cop, good cop. So I'm going to speed up here. Although MFP faced budget cut threats during Carter's presidency, we felt even greater threat from election robbery. One of his major objectives was to defund social research. We took that to mean that MFP would be terminated. We did two things. We followed up on Secretary Harris's advice, which I've already talked about. And we held social events on Capitol Hill where we honored key congressmen. One such event was we held in the Longworth office building for the House of Representatives, where they meet and so on. And we honored two congressmen, Louis Stokes from Ohio, whom I've already mentioned, and Silvio Conti, a Republican from Massachusetts. Stokes was a member of the House Appropriations Committee, so obviously we were interested in money. And Conti was a strong supporter of health research. So he was someone who wanted to see funding for the kinds of things that would also raise our votes. We recognized them in an award, we made up this award called the Distinguished Support of Mental Health Training Award. We made a plaque and everything. So we had this big room, probably this big or bigger, and Hill staffers, NIMH leadership, fellows, former fellows, came, and it was really a grand affair. We gave them these awards, and this caught the attention of NIMH also. So they understood that this was no ordinary grant. This was a thing. That's why I call this a project. It's more than just a grant. We get money and you get money and you go get degrees and you go do good stuff. All of which is true, but it's much more than that. But, anybody remember the Bakke case? Yeah. 1978, when Bakke was decided, MFP came under the scrutiny of the Department of Health and Human Services about limiting our funding to certain groups which they thought may create a quota of the kind outlawed by the Bakke decision. We were asked to submit our materials describing and advertising the program, particularly eligibility, for review by their attorneys. We broadened the language to emphasize the populations we trained our fellows to serve. It was okay to select people to provide mental health care to underserved populations. We just couldn't select certain kinds of people from those populations. So that's what we did, and over the years, we found that there were a few whites who actually were qualified. So that was how we presented our goals while maintaining that people of color were positioned to best provide that care. A follow-up study to the Bakke case showed that black and brown graduates at UC Davis Medical School were admitted under the 16 protected positions, while not scoring that high in their academic careers, got residencies on par with other admitted students, and most importantly, were significantly more likely to practice medicine in health facilities that serve communities of color. The MFP survived that threat, and in the process may have prepared for the emergent interest of SAMHSA, who ultimately took over the clinical portion of the MFP. I should note that in 1992, they instituted a payback requirement. Do you still have that?
Yeah.
No? No? But they had a payback requirement because they didn't trust people getting these federal dollars to go do the things that they were supposedly planning to do. So you had to give one or a year, some number of period of payback for every year of support. And the records show that 93% of our fellows achieved full compliance with that payback requirement. And that's what we chose them for, and they went out and did it. SAMHSA came into being in 1992, and our clinical grants were transferred from NIMH to SAMHSA. And our research training grants remained as what we call T32s at NIMH. For another 10 years, NIMH decided they were no longer in the business of training minority researchers. One of the strategic plans for MFP was that they would fan out across the broad landscape of health and human services and higher education. Becoming leaders in their fields was an important goal. In 2005, I collaborated with Hattie Percent to recognize and honor 10 outstanding black nurses for their leadership, accomplishment, and contributions to nursing for student communities of color. The outcome was the soul of leadership. The book is informative and inspiring and portrays the extraordinary accomplishments of these women. Has anyone not seen or read The Soul of Leadership? I don't know how available it is, but if anybody can get hold of it, it's very important that you read that. Let me briefly enumerate some of the women who are, the 10 women who are featured there. Dr. Rita Duma served as president of the National League of Nurses and a member of the National Advisory Commission on Nursing and associate director of the National Institute of Mental Health and vice president and provost at the University of Michigan School of Nursing. Dr. Eleanor Daniel was president of Chicago State University from 1998 to 2008. Prior to that, she served as executive vice president and provost and dean of the School of Nursing at Hampton University. Dr. Gloria Smith was vice president for programs at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and also served as dean of nursing at Wayne State University and commissioner of public health for the state of Michigan. Dr. Beverly Malone is, as you heard, alumna of the ANA MFP and is currently executive director or chief executive officer, I'm not sure which title, of the National League of Nurses, previously serving as secretary of the Royal College of Nursing in Great Britain. Sorry to find out how you ended up over there. Special assistant to the Surgeon General of the United States, was dean of the North Carolina A&T University School of Nursing, and also served 2 terms as president of the ANA. Dr. Hilda Richards was president of the National Black Nurses Association, chancellor of Indiana University Northwest, and dean of the College of Health and Human Services at Ohio University. Ms. Vernice Ferguson was assistant chief medical director for nursing programs at the United States Department of Veterans Affairs and was branch chief of the nursing department at the Clinical Center, National Institutes of Mental Health. Dr. Ethelyn Shaw Nickerson was on the faculty at the School of Nursing at Ohio State University. She served as president of the American Nurses Foundation and was a member of the board of directors of the American Nurses Association. Dr. May Whitecomb was Florence Professor of Nursing, Francis Payne Bolton School of Nursing, Case Western Reserve, and served as president of Sigma Tau Tau International, Theta Tau, sorry. And finally, Dr. Elizabeth Carnegie was dean of the School of Nursing, Florida A&M University, and editor of Nursing Research. She received the Mary Mahoney Award from the American Nurses Association. I didn't talk about Hattie here, but Hattie would have been, she produced this, she interviewed all these women, and I helped her to craft the statements that they gave. These outstanding black women were part of the infrastructure that Hattie created to support the work of the ANA MFP. They were mentors and colleagues, and I can see how the mentorship has evolved, and helped guide the fellows in the development of their careers. Through grant funding from the Kellogg Foundation, Hattie developed Project LEAD to provide mentorship and training for nurses in HBCU settings to develop the leadership skills and acumen exemplified by these exemplary leaders. She further incorporated MFP Directors in this infrastructure so that all trainees might benefit. This is one ancillary benefit that the MFP has provided the training program over the years. If you've not seen the book, I urge you to get it. A quick shout out I wanted to give to some of my MFP fellows who have gone on to do, many of them have done many wonderful things, just as many of the ANA fellows have done many wonderful things. But I do want to mention some who have stood out by virtue of achieving presidencies of colleges and universities. Oops. Okay. I did show them, right?
Oh, there we go.
So, from left to right, Anne-Marie Kautsay was a fellow. She is the president of the University of Washington, UW. Thomas Parham was recently installed as president of Cal State University, Dominguez Hills. Isaiah Crawford is 3 years ago was installed as president of the University of Puget Sound. Michael T. Brown is the Provost and Executive Vice President of the University of California University System. And Beverly Daniel Tatum, I'm sure you're familiar with, she was President of Spelman College. These are all former psychology MFP fellows who have all, I think back to when we selected them, all shown the kind of attributes that we were looking for. Smart, intelligent, persevering, committed, dedicated, open, creative, flexible, and ambitious. And I think those traits have moved them forward. So in trying to summarize what I think MFP aims were, this may not be exhaustive, and I'm sure there are other ways to think about it, but clearly we wanted to support training and completion of as many fellows as we could. Thus we tried to increase the budgets, sustain the budgets, and make sure that those monies continue. Second, we wanted to provide broad training opportunities that extended beyond the fellows we had money to support. However many we were able to do, we knew there were many, many more who were capable and who should be part of this community. And I think we did that through a variety of means. Many of you have done those through networking. So it's not just the fellows and the alumni, but the other people you touch and associate with, your colleagues in graduate school, your colleagues on faculties. You touch them, and they in turn become part of this broader family. We wanted to create networks of professionals that bridge disciplines, skills, treatment orientations, cultural backgrounds, and commitments. The diversity of this group was exemplary of that. And I think the diversity, whenever we all get together, which we don't do that much anymore, I don't think, I'm not sure. But the four associations and the four MFPs represent such a broad legacy that I think it's very important that we maintain that. And I mentioned before, we selected people with ability, commitment, ambition, and perseverance, and we hope that that would translate to leadership positions. And I mentioned those presidents, but they're deans, they're faculty, they're administrators, they're policymakers, they're all over, they're politicians, they're everywhere. And that's an MFP spreading out across the country to create an infrastructure that ultimately improves the overall health care that we're able to provide. And we want to secure a strong funding foundation. But I want to close. It's important for us to celebrate and recognize and honor what we have accomplished. And I hope you understand what went into creating this energy, this dynamic that is MFP, that you are heirs to. And I know that you're going to pay it forward, and that the people who follow you will be inspired in the same way you are, in the same way generations before you were. And that's really the enduring legacy of MFP, I think. But here's my caveat, or caution. Health disparities persist, and our work is not done. And there are a number of different statistics I can give you to show you health disparities, but one that's really striking to me is this one. These are categories of economic inequality, which I think are really a cornerstone to many of the mental health and behavioral health issues that we face. These are statistics on disparity between black and white in these categories of health benefits, wages for college grads, wages for high school grads, not some college, some high school, wealth and income. 1947 to 2000, compared with 2013. The inequality of blacks relative to whites is greater in 2013 than it was in 1947. That's staggering. And we like to say, oh, we're making progress, and we are, no doubt, making progress in some arenas, but the fact is that we're far from where we need to be, and that there are so many important dimensions of our circumstance that we need to address and address vigorously, and with the kind of commitment and dedication that we had 30, 45 years ago. I highlight this. This is a recent report by McGuire and Miranda. It was done for NIH and it's published by NIH. And I just want to highlight the last red part there. What we need to reduce health disparities is culturally sensitive training for providers, language-appropriate educational and treatment materials, and federal policies that provide the outreach and education support necessary to train a diverse workforce to meet the mental health needs of our nation. This is huge. MFP has grown not only within the association, but we've added new programs. The MA program is totally new because we were all fixated on doctoral study. I think it broadens it even more. And these are the current directors of the MFP programs across the various associations, with a couple of new ones thrown in. And I think it's a big challenge. I think we're up to it, and I think we have to survive the kind of climate that we're in right now. And we've had climates like that in the past. And I think, as Beverly Malone suggested, you have to persevere when it's down and take advantage when it's up and never give up. So I like water. Thank you.